Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Optics in Action, where we spotlight business leaders with vision and clarity. And today I've got Matthew Kleiman, and he is the author of Work Done Right and the CEO of Cumulus Digital Systems. Did I get all that correct so far, Matthew?
You got it, Ryan. Thanks for having me on. It's great to be here.
Absolutely. So I always like to start by asking our guests a little bit about why you do what you do. Why are you passionate about what you do? Then we'll get a little into the what you do and who will benefit and things like that. But what is it that you're all passionate about, and why do you do what you do, Matthew?
Sure, great question. So my passion is improving work quality in heavy industry, in maintenance and construction, and making sure, as the book says, work is done right every time, the first time. And we see the reason I got into this, it's been my life's work for the past 15 years or so, is I took a little bit of a winding journey through my career through aerospace, energy, and construction. And a common theme that I saw in each area was that work quality and safety is often subordinated to schedule and cost pressures. And depending on when this airs, right now in the news, just now is the piece that fell off of the Alaska Airlines 737, and it looks like that's exactly what happened from the preliminary investigations. That in the factories where the 737 was built, there was a ton of pressure to move faster, to reduce costs, and quality and work quality suffered. And that unfortunately happens across industries where there are safety critical applications, not just airplanes, but in construction and chemical plants, bridges, towers, roads, whatever it might be. This unfortunately happens all the time. So I've made it my life's work in two ways. One, I started Cumulus 5 years ago, and that we developed technology to make it super easy for companies to train their workers on how to follow the right procedures, whether it's tightening bolts like at Alaska Airlines or whatever else the work might be. And then use technology to validate that those procedures were actually followed. So again, going to the bolt example, connect to a digital wrench that would confirm that, yes, those bolts hit the right torque value and they're clear to go into the fleet.
Yeah.
So that's one part of it, is the technology side. And then the other side is just helping industry leaders through services and then the book that I wrote with my team to just talk about some of the ways we've been successful in helping companies use systems thinking, systems engineering to improve work quality at their facilities.
Yeah. And where can people find a copy of the book? If they wanted to get a copy of the book, can they find it on Amazon, or
Best
where do you?
place, right on Amazon. Just search "Work Done Right" and my name, Matthew Kleiman. It'll come up.
Fantastic. So tell me a little bit more about, so you've got sort of this digital side and you've got the people side, and bringing these two things around together around quality. So how do you do that? Like do you have a process that you've deployed or you've come up with? Like, how do you help business leaders all the way to the factory floor in making sure that there's alignment? Because it's got to, as you mentioned, the Boeing thing, it's there's business leadership that's driving for quantity and productivity and profitability and all these things, and then you've got folks on the factory floor who are tightening those bolts. And how do you work with organizations to make that connection? What have you found to be the key ways to do that?
The most important thing, well, two most important things. One is transparency and traceability. There has to be visibility from the top right down to the factory floor at the individual worker level of who's supposed to do what, and validating that they did what they're supposed to do. And what often happens in modern business culture is there's a lot of contracting and subcontracting that happens. And what we find is that it's those layers of contracts where people contractually pass on liability from one level of the process to another, and they assume somebody else has a good system for managing something. And it turns out that every, you get a lot of that, if for those of you listening, scarecrow crossing fingers, and somebody else is responsible for it. And so that's on the technology side. Is providing system, making sure everybody's reading from the same songbook, And everybody has that transparency and traceability for every unit of work that happens. The other piece of it is related, is applying systems thinking to a business. Systems thinking is often used for engineering. So you might take some sort of vehicle and you think about it as a whole system. So think about a car, and what happens on the crankshaft is related to what happens in the engine and the steering wheel and the driver and what they're doing. Everything is a system. Or you think about biology, where you could have a circulatory problem that is due to something happening in the lungs, and you're not getting enough oxygen to your heart or to your brain. It's a full system. Everything interacts with everything else. And unfortunately, in modern business, especially industrial businesses, it's very siloed. Kind of what I was talking about before, where everybody thinks somebody else is handling it. But how you do procurement is related to how you do engineering and how you incentivize your workers and manage performance. All of that is interconnected, and we help our clients think about their businesses and their operations in that way, so that if they build this interconnected web and can identify shortfalls that we can help them shore up and then improve quality in their facilities.
Yeah, excellent. And and so how does your software enable organizations to do that? Is your software more focused on the technical component and the technical sort of um, getting the stuff done, those torques at the right
Yep.
levels and things like that? Was it more focused on the executive leadership alignment and communication? Is it some, blend of the two? How does it typically work?
It's a blend of the two, but what it does pretty uniquely, and where we found a big gap in many of the clients we were working with, is that oftentimes customers, they bring in technology that helps with all the planning of the work, the design, all of that. But that the technology kind of stops at the work order. So there's a work order or purchase order that's issued, that goes out to somebody, and then it becomes a black box that workers go and do something, whether it's tightening bolts or whatever else it might be. That isn't tracked with technology. So that's tracked on paper, if it's tracked at all. And then it comes back to somebody signing off and saying, yep, this was done properly, and off we go. And in many cases, unfortunately, it wasn't done properly. So what our software does is we connect to the tools the workers are using. Well, first we digitalize whatever the procedure is the workers are supposed to follow. So, to tighten a bolt, just to keep using that example, I have to follow these 5 steps, one of which is applying a wrench to actually tighten the bolt. And our software will guide the worker through it. So make sure they have the right skill sets, make sure they know what they're supposed to do. And then we'll connect to the wrench that the worker is using with Bluetooth and validate that, yes, indeed, that bolt was tightened or not. And then if it's not, we send an alert up. So we're both guiding the worker, but then flagging for management at whatever level when there is an issue. And that's how we have achieved the success that we have.
Excellent. And how do you keep this from being overwhelming? I mean, so I've got a number of my clients, as I sort of think about it, especially, and I know it depends sort of on the size and volume of a company. But I
Yeah.
used to work for big multinational chemical company, so we
Yeah.
had some very, very high volume products that could be systematized like that and things like
Yeah.
that. But I've also got clients that are smaller, the job shop type activities where kind of getting to that point of detail becomes pretty hard because they've got to do that hundreds of times with hundreds of different customers, and they may not. So is there a niche for your system or your product? Is it more on the high volume, high throughput type activities? Is it how do you manage on the
Yeah.
smaller clients and things? Or is that you know
Yeah.
uh,
Great.
yeah,
Great.
I'll turn it over to you. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's a great question. There's 2 ways I'd respond to that. One, you asked about a niche, and we focus on work that is high volume, high risk of failure, and difficult to automate. So we're not going to necessarily go to somebody, and this is in no way means to disparage it, but someone doing home repairs might not have that high volume type of work where if there's a failure, it might be very frustrating to the homeowner, but it's incredibly unlikely to result in physical injury, either to a person or environmental disasters or anything like that. So we try to focus on areas where the consequence of failure is high. So chemical plants, like you mentioned, aviation, transportation, things like that. The second piece is when we do go work with a customer, whether they're a large company or a small company, we always encourage them to start small. People oftentimes at the senior executive level want to do something, fix everything at once. And that's a really good recipe for nothing happening at all, because you're trying to take too big of a bite of the elephant, so to speak. And it's, figure out one area of their business to look at, or one type of work that they do to look at, achieve a victory there. And then what happens is, one, it's manageable, so you can see results pretty quickly, but two, get buy-in from the rest of the employees at the organization who are familiar with it, to say, oh, this is, one, it's not scary, and two, it actually helps us do our jobs better. And ideally, they start doing this themselves. That's what we want them to do, whether it's using the software or using the business methodology, whatever the appropriate solution is. And that's why we wrote the book. We want people to read the book and be able to do a lot of this stuff themselves, and so they can start thinking about their business this way. And maybe we come in just as an advisor to help them. We don't have to do it for them, because ideally we want every business thinking about quality in this way, so that we don't have the type of accidents that unfortunately are common in our society.
Absolutely. And, I think especially, and I've spent some time in heavy industry, aluminum
Yeah,
mills and,
exactly.
steel refractory and, chemical plants and, big clients that used our chemicals in their in their plants. And, as you think about those things, there's just no doubt that there are those significant opportunities for failure. And as you go through that, if you've found a way to help organizations reduce or eliminate that failure, it's a great place to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're very proud of the results that we've achieved, both with on the technology and the process side, and really hope that folks listening to this podcast, pick up the book and see how it could help. You could help your own organization get better, and make sure, we don't have the same type of failures and accidents that we keep seeing today.
Absolutely. Well, hey, Matthew, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the podcast, and I'm sure that people will benefit from picking up your book. Especially, I've got, as I said, a pretty good network of folks over the years in aluminum
Yeah,
and steel and
absolutely.
in other heavy industries. So, sharing this out to some of them will be, I'm sure, very beneficial. So,
That's
thanks
great.
again for being on the podcast Optics in Action and sharing your wisdom with our audience today. How do people get a hold of you?
Best way is LinkedIn. I'm pretty active there, so just find me. Matthew Kleiman at Cumulus should come up pretty easily. Reach out. I respond to everybody who's not, a spam bot trying to contact me. But that's LinkedIn's the best way. Otherwise, my first name, just Matt at cumulusds.com. That's my email address, and would love to hear from folks.
Awesome. I found a little trick of how I keep how I figure out which ones are the spam bots
How's that?
on LinkedIn. Well, I don't want to put it out there too
Oh, okay,
publicly because
we'll talk
I'll tell you
offline.
offline. I'll tell you offline. Anybody listening to the podcast who wants to know, I'll share it offline, but I don't like to make it too public out there because I don't want people figuring out how to overcome it. But
Right, right,
anyway,
right.
it's been a pleasure having you on, Matthew, on Optics in Action. Thank you again, and I appreciate the wisdom that you shared with our audience today.
Thanks. This was a great conversation, Ryan. Thanks for having me.